Good point.
Chairman Cummings, we're ready.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the City Schools Liaison Committee on October 19th, 2013. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes.
Here.
Councilmember Burt.
Here.
Board Member Collins.
Present.
Board Member Dart. Absent. For the record, we have a quorum.
Terrific. I note that I don't have a microphone in front of me, but is that important?
No, I
Does
think,
the whole
I think
thing
the
pick it up?
owl-
I thought the owl might pick it
Yeah, I
up,
think the
so
owl's
I'm
good.
fine.
Yeah, you're not required to use your microphone, but it does help project your voice.
Okay, then I'm down. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay, we will move to public comments on any items not on today's agenda.
We do not have any requests to speak under general public comment.
Okay, thank you. It is time to approve the minutes of the last meeting. May I hear a motion?
Second. Go ahead. No, yeah, whatever.
Okay, the motion has been moved by Director Collins and seconded by Councilmember Burt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The minutes have been approved. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item, we have city and district reports. At our last meeting, the city went first, so I would like to offer the district the opportunity to go first today.
All right, thank you. Be pretty brief. Just from the staff side, we some of us did watch and we definitely debriefed the city council meeting from Monday. And I'm not speaking about Coverly as much as I'm just speaking about the commenting and we all feel terrible for what we saw and what happened on that day. So we're thinking about you on that one as we start to look at things that we can do at our board meetings to kind of counter some of what we're seeing across the region that was not unique to the city council meeting. But that is definitely something we're looking at, especially right now. There's enough real debate about topics local and beyond. It's terrible that some people are using this as an opportunity to just do some things, it looks like, for sport that are really awful. Our board meeting Tuesday will be largely a typical work meeting because we need to continue on with the work of the district and we're doing some good things there. I have been on school site campuses, visiting with groups, observing our school sites and things look pretty normal as far as the aggregate. Well, we know that there are students that are deeply impacted by the events and others that are trying to make meaning of what's going on. It is a tricky time right now, and a lot is expected of school districts in these times, and everyone is doing their level best. So I'd like to thank especially Ed. Ed and I speak often on a variety of topics, whether it's things that are natural, it's pretty funny, intersections such as traffic, and places where it's more global in nature. I always appreciate him taking calls and checking in. We do that several times a week right now, and it's a good, healthy relationship. So that's it for my report today.
Thank you. Director Collins, do you have anything to add on behalf of the district?
No. Generally, our title is board member or trustee. Just for your future reference.
And which would you prefer that I use?
Board member is fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll go with the city update. Councilmember Burt, would you like to begin? Oh, Chantel Cotton Gaines, of course.
Oh, no worries. Also a very brief update on my part this morning. Good morning, everyone. One of the updates in the upcoming events category that may be of interest to the district is we do have our groundbreaking for our home key site for the homeless shelter here next week on Halloween at 11 a.m. at the site at 1237 San Antonio. Drive to the end of San Antonio and you can't miss it. So we're really excited about that and invite the district, if you have interest, please join us there. The other one is at our last meeting, last month, we had a lot of parents here with questions about traffic safety. And we shared at this committee that our staff would be having their regular city schools traffic liaison committee meeting or traffic safety committee meeting the following week. So the staff have met with the parents. They have talked about the issues at Escondido. They actually have had 2 meetings. One was right here at downtown library and the other one was actually at Stanford. So they've had 2 opportunities to chat with the parents and discuss traffic safety concerns, share information about the upcoming active plan, which was our bike ped safety plan, and opportunities for parents to be involved in that, and share some of the infrastructure issues that they would like the city to consider. And also, we have since had a crossing guard added at Escondido and Stanford Avenue. And so that has been well received by the parents there. We are finishing the crossing guard warrant process, but wanting to be responsive, the city was able to get that crossing guard out there sooner as the process continued. And so it is a really good collaboration. We're grateful to the district for having your staff and team involved in those conversations, as well as a representative from Stanford and our Office of Transportation staff. So just wanted to provide that update so you know that things are moving and staff is hearing the parents and taking action. And that's it from our report.
Madam President, may I make a comment on that?
Sure thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to thank and really commend the city staff. I mean, city manager Shigata and the rest of the team. I mean, I know there are a lot of people involved in the transportation department and elsewhere. Because, you know, the last meeting was challenging. There were a lot of people here kind of pointing a lot of fingers, demanding immediate action. And we're, you know, I know our organizations are not usually set up for immediate action on things like this. So I just think it shows exceptional responsiveness and, you know, really rising to the occasion on the part of the city staff to, you know, turn around an immediate addressing of the problem in a way that satisfied, you know, a genuinely concerned group of community members. And now, you know, working on a long-term solution. So I really, as both a board member of the school district and as a community member, I thank you.
Thank you. And I also forgot to mention our police department that has been actively involved in the conversation as well. So kudos to them as well.
Thank you, Ms. Cotton Gaines. Councilmember Byrd?
Sure, thanks. So a few important topics that the council has taken up since our last meeting. We had a latest meeting on our housing element. And this is to locate housing sites for over 6,000 units in the next 8 years. And the state had turned down our latest submittal, and we're getting ready for our next one that we expect will be submitted in January. And one of the substantial changes that we're making is upzoning a series of parcels along El Camino, really between Palo Alto Square and the Creekside Inn. And the council gave support for several of those parcels, more cautious support for Creekside Inn because of the adjacency to single family neighborhood. But from basically the south side of Hanson up to Palo Alto Square, we have a significantly greater density and greater height for proposals there than anything that the city has approved for housing in a long while. Those additional students, along with potentially some future time at Palo Alto Square, and all of the students at in the what we call the NVCAP area, the Greater Fry's site area, which we also approved the plan on a few weeks ago, have potentially significant impacts on student populations in those areas, and how different of your existing schools can or can't readily accommodate those, as well as the transportation routes, safe routes to and from schools. And that leads me to one related topic, which is we are currently working on the update to our bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And safe routes to schools are a backbone of that plan. I would really, we certainly have the Safe Routes to Schools committee that has been active historically and continues to be in that. But I would really encourage the district to be engaging as well. In part is making sure that we understand where you have school capacity and where you don't. So how it affects our housing, how it affects the investments that we make in safe routes to schools. These are all interplays between your interests and our actions. And related to that, of course, is the discussion we had on Coverly, and because a sizable portion of the new housing sites are in what we roughly call the southeastern Palo Alto, so on either side of San Antonio as it approaches 101. And the issues of where you would have current or future school capacity. We're looking at 2,000 housing units approximately in that area alone. Now, not all these housing units, in fact, probably most of them are not for families, but many are. And then lastly, connected with the same topic, we just had the County Board of Supervisors approve the new community plan, and pardon me, for Stanford. Yes, thank you. And part of that has to do with the housing sites. The supervisors slightly modified the staff proposal that instead of 30% of Stanford's new housing being able to be located off-site in Stanford-owned lands contiguous with the academic lands, meaning basically Stanford Research Park and the lands along Sand Hill Road, they reduced it to 25%. We had encouraged them to allow a portion of that off-campus housing to be at in communities that are transit-rich nearby. That's one of the criteria, is to reduce vehicle miles traveled, and so being on a transit corridor is very important. They didn't move in that direction, and intersected with our housing element is one of the initial Stanford projects that is on Pasteur, a large housing development project that will have many family-sized units, and that will potentially significantly increase the amount of housing for students that certainly on the high school boundary go to Gunn, and middle school as well go to South Palo Alto. I'm not sure.
From the
Stanford West.
land? Yeah,
Yeah.
they go to Fletcher.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we're discussing with Stanford, and it relates to the bike and pedestrian master plan, is that we don't have a real bike boulevard thoroughfare that goes from Stanford West and Pasteur through campus to Hanover out to the ballpark path. And students who can now ride electric bikes would find that route even more convenient. So that's one of the discussions that we're having with Stanford, is how do we make sure that we have adequate transit use and bike and pedestrian use that would flow there. But this transformation in our community of adding 6,000 housing units just in the next 8 years, and then whatever follow on is the state mandate in the next 8 years, is potentially a great impact, not on only on all of our services, but where you could see a significant increase in student housing, not necessarily correlated to where you have capacity, or not necessarily correlated to where we have safe routes to school today. So these are big issues that we share, and that I really want to encourage us to really work deeply and collaboratively on. If we don't address them with foresight, then we're going to be reactive in a few years and probably wish we had used more foresight on it. I did want to mention that we not only have we're not only breaking ground on the transitional housing project that Chantel mentioned, we have the teacher housing project that's under construction, and we have demolition that's already occurred on the Mitchell Park Place on Charleston, a new affordable housing project primarily for disabled adults. And we have two other major affordable housing projects in the works that we hope will be breaking ground the next year or so. So there's that's the largest group of affordable housing projects occurring at once that I recall in at least 30 years. And so it's a lot going on there. Lastly, I just want to mention to the extent that school district employees and students use Caltrain. The electrification of the Caltrain system is on schedule for full launch next September. It will actually be ramping up in electrified trains over the course of starting early 2024. Those trains not only are modern with Wi-Fi and really kind of business class, but the service plan, we just at Caltrain updated the anticipated service plan, and it wasn't clear what was going to happen because ridership remains less than half of pre-COVID ridership, like it is on almost all the fixed rail systems in the region. Bus systems are back to almost full ridership, and fixed rail are half of where they were. And so that creates a big financial strain on those agencies. The good news is that, formerly it was anticipated there at peak hour at the main stations like University, we'd be going to 6 trains an hour from pre-COVID about 5.5 trains per hour. That's been dialed back to 4, which is still very regular service. Good news is CalAv and San Antonio are going to go up to 3 trains an hour at peak hour. And all those stations, Caltrain has stretched out their service. So in the middle of the day, from very early morning through the middle of the day, all the way to midnight, we have 2 trains an hour. And so that is going to be a really valuable transportation service. It means that even district employees who are in the southern half of Palo Alto are going to be able to have reliable train service that they can use to get north or south wherever they live, including after later hours. All this question of can transit be relied upon other than peak hours? And all the transit agencies in the Bay Area, including BART, are shifting now in post-COVID toward greater service at outside the peak commute hours. This is the trend that's happening. So that's the updates.
Thank you. And I'll just add a few things. It's been a long time since our committee met, and then we met last month, and our meeting was really devoted to the conversation, or largely spent on the conversation about school and traffic safety outside Escondido. So I'm looking at my notes from what I was going to share in September as well. I want to just agree with Trustee Collins on his commendation of the staff for how expediently and cooperatively we were able to reach a temporary solution that I think the community is really pleased to see us having done. So that's really a win all around. Just to give a little bit more color to what Councilmember Burt shared about the 6,000 units and 2,000 units down near San Antonio, we actually voted to call that area the Bayshore Alma San Antonio region. They're calling it BASA. I'm not sure this acronym will take off, but
Sorry, what region is that again?
right, Bayshore Alma San Antonio. We made it a priority development area, which makes us eligible to go for regional and state grants related to development. So it's It's the San Antonio corridor out to Bay Shore, a little bit up Bay Shore, a little bit of, I don't have the map handy, but we can provide it to
Is it
you.
mostly on the other side? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm just trying to visualize it.
No, it
It's
is,
Bay Shore and then it crosses 101 or?
it barely crosses 101 to our new home key facility.
Yeah.
But it's mostly on this side.
Got it.
And we do have a map that designates
Okay.
it, so I think that'd be
I'll
best.
look at it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But both sides of San Antonio.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Interesting.
The point, I think, is, we'd be nuts to try to put in 2,000 new units in sort of an ad hoc, willy-nilly way. We've got to create, if we can, an intentionality around where will these kids go to school and where will the safe routes be and where will the parkland be and, you know, what will the amenities be and the retail and so on. So it's great to see, you know, this sort of steps toward a plan coming together. We voted to purchase insurance on the price of gas, and I think that impacts the school district as much as it impacts anybody else. We had such a spike in natural gas prices last January, really causing havoc at the level of the pocketbook. So we've decided to purchase some insurance to protect us against those significant increases. And that was an experiment on our part, and we'll see how it goes. But we felt it was imperative to not do the same thing we did last year. We had a pre-screening on a development proposal for 3265 El Camino by Half Dome Capital for a 44-unit housing development for teachers. And it was really wonderful to see so many members of the district community come in. Teachers were there, families were there, union members were there at this meeting, clearly in favor of this proposed housing. What took us aback, I think, as a council was, even though these the rates are pegged at either 51 to 80% of area median income or 81 to 120%, while we think of that as affordable, when we saw the actual numbers, many of us were stunned that the rents were as high as they were, and it caused a bit of consternation up there on the dais. Strange to see the school community all come out to be excited about this and have us go, wait a minute, is this really affordable for y'all? And I think it speaks to the fact that we could probably all do a better job at narrating to what affordability is and what the constraints are, and to be really clear on why teachers would say, like, yep, we can get behind that rent that doesn't seem super affordable, but actually is something we could swing. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what affordability is and who needs what. And I think this project, which many probably thought would have been a simple no-brainer, and the project is by no means off the table. We were just getting a preliminary review, but there was such a disconnect around affordability. And I think it's important for all of us to be more mindful about that and do a better job of articulating what's what. And the last thing that I'll say is we met, as you may know, on Monday night, and Cubberley was on our agenda, and we were finally able to have a public session to respond to your letter. And we directed staff to work with our ad hoc Cubberley committee, which is Councilmember Burt, Mayor Koo, and me, to discuss terms for either a potential ground lease with the district or an outright purchase of land from the district. And we made clear that we're taking the swap of land at Terman Park off the table. So those were, I think, the salient points of our conversation, and we look forward to moving expediently on that to come to you ready to make some kind of proposal. Councilmember Burt, do you want to add anything on that front?
Just from a process standpoint, so the city council actually last spring had appointed an ad hoc committee on Cubberley, which is Mayor Koo, Julie and myself, and we had not met. And so now we will be convening as a follow-up to the council meeting to first internally kind of discuss the council direction, but then presumably reach out to you, and I don't know whether the district has current counterparts, and from a standpoint of being able to kind of go into discussions and potential negotiations, whether you need to go through a process to enable any board designees along with the superintendent to be enter into those discussions, not to make decisions, of course, bring back to our respective bodies. So our group would be our city manager and the ad hoc committee. So I don't know whether you are aligned with a similar process that would enable us to kind of go forward in that way.
I can touch that if you'd like.
Please.
Just two things. One in your comment about the housing, just quickly. To my knowledge, our district has no official role in that housing project at all. So I first heard about it in the newspaper. That's the level of
Me too.
commitment we have in partnership, and our unions were notified. They did know, and we had no discussion about it. So just, no, it's not a pro or against. It's no other statement other than we have nothing to do with the project as a school district at this point. Okay. And Spur, to your question, we have no process set up right now. And what I would expect is when we receive a proposal or draft, or maybe you have multiple proposals, whatever it may be, our commitment was to react to the proposals. And I think at that point, it would be likely that we would put together an ad hoc committee to be able to move it at that point. But for right now, we have nothing set up.
And part of our concern is we have questions of you to be able to really refine our proposals. There were kind of a few things that weren't clear to us in terms of what is the range of what you would be receptive to. And so I don't know what would be the best process to get those clarifications. So that's one of the issues.
Yeah, I cannot promise. I can talk to our board president this afternoon and see if we can set something on our agenda to talk about the potential of an ad hoc. But right now that is not agendized, but that's something that we will either do soon or at least consider. Okay, good points.
May I make a couple comments?
Please.
Thank you. A few things. Thank you for the rich and thorough reports. That was great. Hitting a few points. One is on the cross town bike boulevard. I'm a big fan of that idea. I rode my bike from the far edge of Barron Park, approximately Gun High School here today. And it is, it's not something that I would want a middle schooler to be doing every day. The way it's currently set up, it is too traffic intensive, too turn intensive, to everything intensive to expect an 11 or 12-year-old to be able to navigate reliably in the full range of things that happen when you're out on the streets. So a bike boulevard, and that doesn't even count Stanford traffic, where my wife, who commutes to Stanford by bike almost every day, has actually had accidents on Stanford campus because it is a very tricky environment for bikes there. There are lots of bikes, there are lots of pedestrians, there is a lot of unpredictability on the Stanford campus. So again, having middle schoolers navigating through that on a daily basis without some kind of path laid out for them that's not a preferred route to school, in my opinion. What was the second one? Oh, I really compliment you guys on, I too have noted the mushrooming of low-income housing projects, and I didn't realize it was the most in 30 years, but I knew it was the most in certainly the time I'm aware of, which probably goes back 20 years. And that's really impressive because I know there isn't a lot of financing for those projects, and that's always a difficult thing for any municipality to try to address. So, and I'm obviously particularly close to my heart. For those who know me, I have an adult disabled child, so I'm very aware of the challenges of adults with disabilities finding long-term housing situations, particularly in their community, close to their families, which many of the disabled people really value because they depend on their families maybe more than other young adults. So I'm very supportive of those efforts and really recognize that this is a change from what's in the past, and I think a very positive one. On the overall topic of housing, I think, as both of you laid out, there's a lot of activity. Both in terms of proposed development, current development project, proposed development projects. Planning for hopefully proposed development projects. And it does affect us. Not directly. I mean, one of the things that I think is important to emphasize as we kind of enter a period of housing growth. Is that the school, obviously, it's not permitted under California law to consider school capacity as a factor in improving housing projects. And we really take that to heart too. I mean, our commitment is to teach every kid who lives in the district and shows up. We don't have any problem with that. We don't want you guys to put your thumb on the scale and say, yeah, let's put housing here because there's schools here, but not over there because there aren't. We want you guys to do what you do. And then we'll figure out a way to get them to school and educate them. But it is helpful to plan. And one thing, you know, I've been involved, and my first role in the district level committee work was on the bond oversight committee. So I've been involved with the bond building program and the facilities for now, gosh, this will be the 15th year. So, and what I've learned is that, you know, we on our side, we tend to think about this stuff sporadically, and we don't have great institutional memory about it. It comes and goes. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's true on both sides. So, and we're as we enter an unprecedented period, or a period that is different than anything in the last at least 20 plus years, where there's going to be a lot of building, certainly a lot of talk, and probably a lot of building in town. It is very useful for us to be aware in more detail than what we read in the paper of what's actually going on. And I had conversations, back and forth with City Manager Shikata, and I think Councilmember Burt and a couple of other people, trying to understand what's going on in the, I don't know what we call the Page Mill to Matadero corridor on El Camino. Because there are a bunch of projects being contemplated there on both sides of the street. Hundreds and hundreds, thousands of units probably cumulatively being talked about there. But, for our planning, it's like, well, when? And then, well, what will they be? Will they be studio units, which will probably not generate many children at all? Or will they be 3-bedroom townhouses, which in our experience generally generate the same amount of students as single family houses? So that makes a big deal in our planning, especially as we balance that with a secular decline from existing housing sources, which is leading some of our schools to a point where they're, difficult to operate at the level that they are. And so understanding some of the details about what and when is this going to happen in 2 years, or is this hopes, wishes, and dreams, and maybe it's 5, or is it, not even a glimmer in somebody's eyes, and they're probably never really going to happen? And you guys don't know either, right? But you know more than we know. So one of the things I suggest, and I think I've suggested this to Dr. Austin as well. I know I suggested to Ms. Chow, is that we institute a regular meeting of people involved with that topic. And it doesn't have to be that often. I think quarterly is even probably too much. Maybe twice a year, maybe once a year, but just an in-depth discussion about, let's go through all these potential projects and put unit numbers and configurations and timing on them, so we can project that into our current enrollment and see where capacity might be going. I think that would be very helpful for us as we go through this kind of very different period than the period that we've got through. I see Councilmember Burke.
Go ahead.
I think that's a great idea, and at least what we can do is share what we know, what we don't know, and out of what we don't know, what we speculate, which may not be firm knowledge, but it's better than nothing. And so I think we can do that. And you mentioning that you wrote here this morning reminded me of one other update. So last night I wrote to Fletcher Middle School to talk on a panel on out of the Fletcher Middle School sustainability program. And they were very interested in learning more about the city programs and how they can have a potential relationship. It was a great discussion, but I would not have wanted to will that route that I took on younger students. And there are things that we can do on that I actually noticed last night that I've already got messages off to our staff on for minor improvements. But the bigger one is, for instance, if we can complete this kind of midtown crosstown route, which would go from midtown area of Palo Alto with a bike bridge over the tracks in Alma, in the vicinity of El Dorado, Loma Verde vicinity, through this new NV cap area, and then potentially off-road to the Bull Park bike path. And the safety improvement of that off-road versus currently where we have sharrows on Matadero, and we're telling students that that's the safest route, and the sharrows somehow on a narrow windy road make that adequately safe is just the best we were able to do to take a bad situation and make it kind of warn cars to slow down and beware of bikes, which is quite different from the safety of an off-road path that is possible. So anyway, that's a plug I didn't want to pass up.
I just have one more thing if I may. Did you want to go?
I'll go last.
You sure? Okay. I did want to mention, since you chimed in on the getting to Fletcher, that Councilman Committee President Lithcott Haynes is also a denizen of that community. I don't know how big a biker you are, but is very present in the community, a long-term resident of the community, and I'm sure knows the issues with biking around that community very well. The last thing is because you mentioned gas pricing.
Yeah.
I would be remiss not to mention, since I attended the Sustainable Schools Committee meeting yesterday, which is one of my favorite committees to attend. That Fletcher will become, when we finish a bunch of the renovation projects that are currently underway, with the exception of the pool, which I can talk about separately if you like, will become an all-electric school. And I put, I don't know, maybe you know, I've got a message to Eric Holm. I suspect that Palo Verde, which we just remodeled, may be an all-electric school. Do you know?
Don't know.
I don't know either, but I know we spent a boatload on electricity there and brought in a giant new switch, which almost derailed the project.
That's very true.
But I think that is part of our sustainability planning, is we are trying to, like, as I know the council wants us to, kind of reduce our gas usage, our natural gas usage, and replace it with electrical. And Fletcher will be one of the first facilities that will be like that.
And that's predominantly, or that electrification is with heat pumps, not just electrified, which is the really the best technology, and that's really great what's happening in that transformation of schools.
Yeah.
Thanks for this really rich discussion. It's been, I think it's a great example of why the committee exists and what we can accomplish. Sorry.
He's just saying Palo Verde is all electric.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
Yes, I just got it.
That's great, great. What I wanted to add, thank you for recognizing, Trustee Collins, that I'm a denizen of that part of town. And actually, I'll just put on the record that since becoming a local elected official, I have, because of the conversations about e-bikes that I've been privy to through our agendas, I've become a rider of an e-bike, and I have biked from our neighborhood here. And it's astonishing to me that how simple it was to just do a deeper dive, learn a thing or two, and decide to make some behavioral habit changes. And it's given me a completely different view of the city, you know, obviously to ride through it, taking a different route than I would take with my car. I've learned so much, and I wouldn't have had this perspective had I not joined council. So that's been a huge positive for me. What I wanted to just circle back to, trustee Collins, is I loved your language about basically put the housing where you need to, and we'll figure out how to educate them. It was such a beautiful philosophical statement. You also mentioned that there are some areas of town where enrollment is dwindling, and it made me think of the potential we have, not just to plan with good twice a year or so conversations about where's the housing, when is it coming, and so on. But we could actually perhaps be clever and creative together. And the thing that comes to mind, which we won't go into detail on because it hasn't been agendized, but just as a brief reference, in our single family neighborhoods, it is possible now to split lots and build a duplex or an ADU or what have you. And we could potentially increase the number of families who are able to live in single family home neighborhoods where school enrollment is declining. And that could be an exciting conversation for us to have. Whether we want to try to incentivize that or not, is probably something we should have a conversation about at some point in the future. At least I would like to. With that, I'm going to ask if there are members of the public who would like to comment on our city and district reports.
Sorry to keep you waiting so long.
We have no members of the public on this item.
Okay, terrific. We'll move on then to an item that was carried over from last month, which is our memorandum and summary of the Beverly Hills model. Brief recap: Beverly Hills School District and the City of Beverly Hills seems to work quite effectively together. We have heard regarding their joint interests and potential issues of conflict. And we asked Ms. Cotton Gaines to do some deeper dive into what the Beverly Hills model is, so that we could begin to figure out whether that would be something we would want to emulate, extrapolate from, in order to make our own interactions via this committee more effective and more impactful, more useful. So, Ms. Cotton Gaines.
Sure, thank you. And I'm really just going to kind of go through the memo that you have. So I'm assuming you all have read it, so this will be a recap, but I wanted to share. And we also invited the Beverly Hills staff to come, but I think this time conflicts with a regular meeting of theirs. So they send their apologies that they are
That's
not,
what they said.
they send their apologies that they are not able to be present with us today.
What time is it? It doesn't matter. I'm a regular meeting.
So to start, there's a few, and this is building off of the research that trustee Collins did in June. So I did want to say that your presentation was a good launch point for this dialogue today. There are a couple key differences between their community and our community that are noteworthy for the information that I'll share about their model. One of which is it's a much smaller population, and the city does not have a lot of facilities. They actually have very few city facilities for recreation programs and other things. So some of the catalyst, I think, for their agreement is that the district has utility or spaces and facilities, and the city does not. And so in order to do community, typical community recreation programs, they actually lean very heavily on the schools because the schools have spaces. So population wise, just that's in the memo, they're about 30,000 people. And the city owns no recreational facilities or playing fields. The committee supports the JPA agreement with the district. They are using it particularly for recreational facilities, including fields, swim, and classroom space for some of the childcare work as well.
What was it? The second one was, did you say swim?
Yes.
Field swim. Okay.
Swim and gym.
Got it. Oh, swim and gym.
Yeah, they rhyme. Their community services department is the team on the city side that manages the program and the staffs and the contracts for the actual activities that are run through this agreement. Once the district does the agreement with the city, then the city staff are the ones that are operating all of the programs there. The current JPA model has been in place for many decades and is renegotiated every 3 years. I get a little bit of a sense that some think that that's really frequent. And so that was some information to share here. The existing agreement was put in place in 2020, so they have been actively renegotiating their agreement right now. There's an updated draft of their agreement, but I don't think it's been finalized or it's like being finalized right now. So just for information. The dollar sign on the agreement is very noteworthy. And again, the city doesn't own any facilities there, so this is the piece where I think it is not one-to-one at all.
How much do we get?
I'm not even going to share the number, if that is the question. Yes, the city is relying heavily upon the district there. And that links to the dollar amount. The governing structure.
11.59.
As of the last agreement, there are some slides that I did put in the memo of the estimated amounts per year for their agreement they're currently renegotiating. And they teeter around 14 million plus or minus per year.
I'm sorry, so what was the 14 was?
The city there is paying the proposed amount for the city in Beverly
Proposed
Hills.
amount. Got it.
Because they are in a renegotiation period
Got it.
right now for 2023, 24, and this one would end in 25 and 26. So they put an amount each year for what they think that the agreement will be. And the current existing agreement that's expiring is around 11 million. It has gone up to about 14 million per year. Which is very high. The governing structure that they've had in place is similar to this committee. It's 2 members of the school district board and it's 2 members of the city council. And they meet as needed. It sounds as if the JPA, the liaison committee, is actually meeting around these times of renegotiation is where they have more frequent meetings. And other than that, it's if something comes up. So one of the questions that this committee had in relation to thinking about all these other models is what is the meeting frequency that is most useful and where you can get the most out of your meetings and really providing information either way. So in this case, it's really just if there's a topic that is of shared interest that prompts a meeting, or these times where these renegotiations are happening. So every 3 years, they have more frequent meetings to talk about the agreements. And sometimes they do have difficulty with scheduling, which I suppose is a matter of if you're not regularly meeting, having something on calendar sounds like it's a little difficult to do. Staffing, there is a designated person from the Beverly Hills Unified School District as a staff person, and then the city has a liaison in their community services department as sort of the 2 key staff members. From there, as I referenced, the city has the staff that manage their recreational programming. So there are lots of staff there and they may be in regular dialogue with the district staff as necessary. So at the specific school sites, for example, if they had any issues, they're in communication with the district staff. And though the committee does not meet frequency, the staff members do. So there's, I think they said they're meeting quarterly quarterly at least. So they are typically in daily conversation related to the spaces, but a broader meeting is at least quarterly. And in terms of what to include in the agreement, that was something else this committee had discussed. As I've referenced, the agreement is heavily focused on recreation programs and joint space usage for both indoor and outdoor space, civic programs, youth sports organizations, etc. The agreement also includes crossing guards, closed camera television cameras at all school sites, and school resource officers in their elementary and middle school. They have 1 middle school and 3 elementary schools, very different from our district as well in terms of the number. And we've talked about when their agreement last went into place. When they're renegotiating, they discuss which, if there need to be changes to the actual services provided from the city to the district and in terms of the space from the district to the city. So that's sort of, they use the renegotiation period as a time to discuss if anything should be added to it or taken out of the agreements. And lastly, in the memo, you'll see the slides, which are, they discuss any changes that have happened since the last agreement and to the new one. And they also just talk about the payments that they have had as the agreement amounts over time. So I have that information in the memo just in case the committee had questions on it. And that pretty much sums up the information that we found as a response to the questions here.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions, reflections?
We have community comment on this?
Sure, happy to go to community comment.
We have one request to speak. It's Phil Matz.
You can, sir, if you wouldn't mind coming here, just so folks can hear you if they're on Zoom.
Okay.
Yes, my name is Phil Mast, and I strongly support the district and city taking a look at the Beverly Hills model for our community. It's known that the school district has a fair amount of unused space that could potentially benefit our community. I think the problem with the current model is that the district staff is just not set up to be a landlord. It's not their job. And so the surplus district space does not get utilized in the way it might if it were instead managed by the city. The city, as you know, Parks and Recs is well set up to provide space for the community. If we look at how the city could get more space, we're looking at maybe another community center. There just isn't land available. If there is, it's going to be really expensive for the city to buy and build and use it. It makes far more sense to me for the city to look at paying the district money. It would be far less. It may not be 11 million or 14 million, but it would probably be far less than trying to build new space somewhere. And I just think it's worth considering.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mast. No further members of the public?
Correct.
Great, thank you. Okay, back to the committee.
Just kind of some initial thoughts. One is that there are, as Montel had mentioned, a lot of differences that Beverly Hills doesn't have a lot of its own community facilities, so they rely on this agreement that they have to contract access to school facilities. I think there's a lot of differences that wouldn't apply here. I saw that through the contract, the city has first right of access to all district facilities after hours, for instance. And I would be very surprised that the district would want to defer that because they have a lot of after hour activities for student functions and parent functions. But the model is interesting. And as well as kind of some of the elements there, I was noticing on crossing guards that the district actually manages the crossing guard program, but the city pays the district 50% of the cost of it. Interesting. And it starts with kind of that philosophical question of how is that a exclusive responsibility of one party or a shared responsibility, and I think that that's something that we could explore as well. Even have issues around library facility access to the public, and it kind of goes into a reflection on what we had a couple of decades ago, when in part as the district had low enrollment, and what's now Fletcher Middle School was a community center, but even at that time the pool access there was open to the public, and South Palo Alto, which has no public pool access, had that. And I seem to recall that there was a time where even the gun high school pool had hours, then, I don't know if they were just summer hours or whatever, where that was managed by the city as part of a rec program and open to the public. The Fletcher school site had a satellite library, city library, for a couple of decades. And when the district needed that site back, South Palo Alto lost the only branch library that it had. And so there are needs in areas of our community that we haven't been able to meet, and that I don't think are readily solvable through city-owned lands. I'd be really interested in exploring what availability there might be for either the gun or the Fletcher pool for South Palo Alto on a contract basis to operate that through our rec department when it's not utilized by the district and when it would be valued hours for the public. And then I also noticed in here that was that it appears, if I read it right, that the contract pays rent for fields and other space, but the district absorbs the cost of that field maintenance. We have a different field maintenance agreement that I think has worked real well for us. So I'm not so sure that the components apply very well, but the model is intriguing in a few aspects of it. Just open up possibilities to say, well, the way we do things is not the only way that cities and districts come to do things. So it's not that so much that it's written in stone or that it's a legal basis. It's really policy decisions on a lot of these collaborative relationships. So those were my takeaways.
Did you want to go last?
Yeah. At our last meeting, you suggested I go last. that the
Oh,
chair
well,
was
no,
supposed to
no,
last. Yes,
it's fine. No,
absolutely.
I would think you would.
I am planning to go last.
So I'll go next. First, I want to just thank the deputy city manager for that report, which I thought was excellent. Thank you for chasing down the, I'm sure, very busy Beverly Hills staff and getting them to be forthcoming about their agreement. I talked to a Beverly Hills city council person back in the day, or maybe it was must have been a school board member, probably was a school board member, who gave me, mostly griped about how hard it was to negotiate with the other side. But what I'm sure would be a feature of any agreement that looked like this. I think that was a really good report. That, as Councilmember Burt said, I think for me, the components of the agreement, as the deputy city manager pointed out, are responsive to the conditions in that community. So it's not the components that are so interesting, though I think we can probably learn by looking at their components, and more the structure. And the driving force behind, even going down, even considering this path, in my view, was the realization that I had after, a few years of service in our district, of how the surprisingly fleeting nature of institutional memory. Because as staff turns over, and most staff does turn over, sorry, Dr. Austin.
Someone need to know about.
Staff does turn over, and most of the staff in our district is, and I think the city too, are not from and of the community. So they're coming here from somewhere else and they're learning, kind of, they see what they see, they hear what they hear, they respond to what comes in front of them like everybody else. But they're not, they don't have time to do research projects about how things came to be a certain way. Why do we fund 1.3 million or whatever it is for children's theater? Does anybody else do that? Why do we have, why do we pay for the crossing guards? In my last town, does the district pay for the crossing guards? It's like, there are a lot of perfectly reasonable questions that all have answers, but the answers are buried in the mists of time. With, retired city council people and, moribund school board members. And nobody has time. The institutions lose that memory.
And so I think part of the idea was to, in that kind of world where institutional memory is both fleeting and mismatched. One organization may have one perspective on how and why things work a certain way, and the other may have a completely different perspective. And there's no reconciliation. They never even talk about it. They just kind of have this perspective of why things are the way they are. It's very difficult to make progress because there's no basis, there's no foundation to build on. You're building on sand, right? You say, I have a great idea because my understanding is this, and we should do that. And the other side said, what are you talking about? We have absolutely no interest in that at all. That conflicts with our view about why we do this. In fact, we want to do the opposite and get out of that agreement. And so I think, and I've seen that happen. I see Councilmember Burt smiling and Councilmember Wolfgang frowning. So I think we've all run into it. We've all run into it. And so the idea of this was to create an institutional basis for that collective memory, where we captured some of these things in agreements and standing committees, ongoing committees that become the embodiment of that institutional memory. So why did we do that? Well, we can look at the minutes of the meeting from 3 negotiation cycles ago and find out, just the way we do with laws, right? It's like, well, what were the intent of the founding fathers when they passed that? It's like, well, some poor guy in some law school reads the proceeds of the Constitutional Convention and tries to figure it out. So it at least gives us a fighting chance to capture that institutional memory and give us something to build on, so that we can actually say, because I'll tell you, and I don't think Dr. Austin would disagree with this. Our response is, as we've tried to, I've been on the board 7 years, as we've tried to, and you've been here now, so 6 years, as we've tried to, instantiate our regime. I think part of our mindset has been, we should decouple from, other, we are too entangled with some of these other organizations. They put demands on us that we don't understand. They encumber us, they keep us from doing things that we think are right for us, but they make us feel, either tell us we can't or make us feel bad about it. And what we really should do is disentangle ourselves so we can vigorously pursue our mission. I will say, I said this at our last board meeting, we are more vigorously touching things that have not been touched in the past and making changes of settled arrangements than any time I can remember in the 20 odd years that I have institutional memory for the school district. And I think all for the good. So, that approach hasn't been without benefit, but it's also come with cost. And part of the cost is some of our long-term partners are like, hey, what about me? And isn't this institutional relationship we have, isn't that valuable? And I thought this performed this function for the community. You guys don't think that anymore? And there's literally no basis to discuss or even consult institutional memory to figure out whether what the other side is saying is true. So I would like, part of my ethos as an elected official and as a person is to try to leave things a little bit better for the next guy than when I got here. And so I think some kind of arrangement like this helps make it better for the next generation of us to, kind of move things along, not to have to rethink and reinvent, but can build on what's been done before and hopefully make it so that we can offer even better things to our joint constituents. As a South Side denizen, community pool, great, community library, great. One thing that I know you guys hear from your constituents is that city is under parked, right? As much park acreage as the plan calls for. Well, if you consider city schools parks, then maybe you are. That's a lot of parkland. And in fact, we all know it's de facto parkland today when school is not in session. So there's a lot of ways to think about our joint assets and joint efforts together that I think would yield benefits for our community. But we don't have the bandwidth for ad hoc stuff. We just don't. We're doing too much on our own. So I think trying to institutionalize, if we want to go down that path, I think institutionalizing it and investing in it for the next generation of programs and collective action would be. I'm enthusiastic about it, but though I do see a world of pain in creating a JPA-ish, I wouldn't create a JPA, but a fully negotiated structure. Dr. Austin, did you want to add anything to this or? Trying to stay out.
I agree that it will be very hard
Good
and an excellent exercise for our elected officials.
one.
Now, there've been 8 school districts, each one with different relationships with cities. My last school district had 4 cities, which was much more challenging. I've also worked in Laguna Beach, which was more similar to here with a single city where we had agreements that were very different than our relationship with Palo Alto and the Unified School District, but I thought some really good things. I think the challenge is this on both sides, not starting with a laundry list of all the cool stuff we do for the other side and trying to improve positions. But instead, really where we're making progress in the school district is when we start with a purpose statement and then build from scratch instead of tinkering around. I think if we try to tinker around, it's going to have a lot of frustration and probably not get the desired impact. So, before we would jump in, I think my gut is telling me before we would jump into something, we would settle on protocols and purpose before we started a list of any kind. Would probably be the most important work. And that might not be real quick, but I think jumping right into the work would be a recipe for disaster. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I'll add that I was struck by the specificity of this agreement. You will call us at this moment in time in order to do this, and if you do this, then this will happen. It was really quite an orchestrated dance, and agree that the things that they've got going on, the components are quite different than what we've got going on. But it does feel like an attractive model, unless it's a world of pain, as you said, to get us to a fully negotiated structure. But maybe that pain is worthwhile. I really I'm the newest person at the table, and so coming up to speed on the bits, the crossing guards and the middle school sports and the facilities and so on, and trying to understand as a relative outsider early on, like what is the logic behind this? I turned to my colleague, Councilmember Burt, who's been a leader in our city for so long, and you want to talk about where the institutional memory is lodged. It's in the heads of those who have led for a long time, and we are then often lost when those people move on to other roles. So I really appreciated the point of the value of having a mechanism to store institutional history. And good minutes are a way for us to navigate back through time to understand what was. And yet minutes are by definition date oriented. This happened in September, and this happened in August, and this happened last June, and this happened last year. But a well-indexed set of minutes that are actually guides to the topics are what we need. What has been our history on crossing guards going back through time? You don't want to have to wade through every set of minutes to try to find the answer. You really want to be building a narrative topically, I would think. So that you can go back and understand why is it the way that it is. I see tremendous value in figuring out some kind of mechanism for doing that. It almost becomes, it's a reference tool, and it allows the current people to understand why things are the way they are, the various agreements and arguments and compromises and so on. So we're not wasting time in the present. Or failing to really fully appreciate the past as we make decisions in the present. So I'm excited about the potential for, a different type of record keeping. What I want to ask is, what would it take for again, being the newcomer, I've seen a chart of. Well, we do this and you do that, and we give this to you and you give that to us, and we pay this and we pay that, you pay that, and we have this committee, and when we began this session. There was a real question on the table of whether the committee needs to exist, whether this committee is effective. And so I'd like to ask my colleagues, so this is the current structure and we have the various charts and understandings. What might it take to move to a more Beverly Hills-like protocol or structure? What would it take to get us? I mean, Superintendent Austin mentioned we should do protocols and purpose before jumping in. What might be the next steps toward achieving a structure that better serves us in light of what we've learned from Beverly Hills?
Yeah. Well, I think if we were interested in exploring what we just call a master agreement, for lack of a better description, if this committee was interested in that, I think that it would need to be maybe a subcommittee of this group to look at presenting to this committee a proposal of what might be that, starting with kind of the purpose and the master agreement, or a purpose around that master agreement. And then our respective members here would decide whether to take it back to our boards and seek support to pursue it. So we'd have to take it back to our boards, we'd have to frame it. And so that work would first need to be done. And that framing would have nothing binding on either of our bodies because we haven't had that authorization from those bodies. But at least it would think through and put something on the table for this committee to consider whether to take back to our boards and make a recommendation or not. I don't know, what are folks' thoughts on that as a prospective step?
Any thoughts?
I think it's a terrific idea. And I think the two of you should be the subcommittee.
In baseball, we call that calling the other guy's number. You got it, you got it. Yeah, I mean, I'm conscious of the timing. I mean, we only have one more meeting of this committee. My expectation, do you think, am I wrong? Usually we don't meet in December, right?
Usually you don't meet in January for sure, but December is if you want to.
Yeah.
I was gonna pose that to the committee anyway, because the meeting is technically once the council break begins, but you have met in December before.
We can move
Typically,
it earlier in the month.
exactly, but typically you don't have January, so.
Yeah, or July.
Correct.
Yeah. And typically, often but not always, the membership changes quite a bit on both sides when the year turns over. So it may be that may limit the ability of this group to, well, we have to be mindful of that in anything that we try to do, because if the clock runs out, the clock runs out. And the next people will decide whatever they want to do. And yeah, and then I think our body would have to. I don't know what our body's reaction to it would be. I think we would look to staff as well to make sure staff thought it was a good investment in time to take this kind of thing on. And that'll be, and then the answer, that's always compared to what, right? Because there's very little that happens that doesn't take staff time, even though, as you said, it's good exercise for elected officials. Usually we drag staff into it in either way. So I think those are, and that's really the thing. I think I said this, a few months ago, or maybe when I made that first presentation. The biggest question about this kind of thing is the juice worth the squeeze. What problems are we trying to solve, and are they big enough problems that we want to invest the resources to create this kind of permanent overhead? And is this an investment? Should we treat this as an investment or as an expense? And our bodies would have to figure that out. But yeah, I think it's reasonable. If the committee members think that it's reasonable to try to proceed with it, then I feel somewhat. I feel responsible for bringing this up in the first place. So it would be derelict of me to say, good luck with it at this point.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that you brought it forward, and it has taken us time to get to this point for all kinds of reasons. Also being new, I wasn't sure how often the committees, since we don't have elections, replacing people. I just haven't thought ahead to what do committees structures look like starting in January. So thank you for that point of clarification. And I think it would be just a stunning example of what we've talked about here today. If we've gotten this far in this concept and we think we might want to have a subcommittee really delve into it and make a proposal to take back to our bodies, but somehow we ran out the clock and a brand new set of people are sitting here and they have to start from scratch thinking about whether the current structure makes any sense. So it would be a darn shame to lose the brain power that my colleagues on the committee have put into, mulling over this topic. So I would really like to see us continue forward and work with the leaders of the respective bodies in January to ask that the two of you be reappointed to city schools to continue to push this forward. So do we entertain a motion to create a subcommittee? How does that work?
I suppose so. And I would just say that the thought has occurred to me that we often will have turnover in the committee, but we could inquire with our board and council leadership on if we're going to have a focus area that's particularly important. Do we want to ask if they're receptive to continuity? And I won't be surprised if they say, oh, there's merit in that. There's nothing that requires a turnover of this body, but we can check.
In my experience, there's rarely a brawl over seats on the city school liaison committee. So
Yeah. Rarely, you say.
Rarely.
Yes, good. I will move that we create a subcommittee to explore a framework for a master agreement between the district and the city for the purpose of this committee reviewing and considering whether to take back to our respective bodies, and that board member Collins and I would be the members of that subcommittee.
Is there a second?
I'll second for purpose of discussion, and then just ask to clarify, maybe this is a friendly amendment. No, it's just clarification. That it would by definition be an ad hoc subcommittee,
Correct.
not subject to the Brown Act. Because it is ad hoc.
I believe the ad hoc committee the subcommittee would not be subject. We'll double check with our.
Okay. I'm pretty sure ad hoc committees in general are not subject to the Brown Act.
Yeah, but I don't know whether an ad hoc committee of a Brown Act committee is. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That's a quick question.
Yeah.
I just know I have 4 board members who are not sitting here right now. And I want to make sure we're not exceeding the authority of this group and that I don't get sideways or we don't get sideways with our respective bodies. Is this something that's been done before to create an ad hoc or subcommittee of this group without going back to the board where it's typically assigned? Just my question.
My answer would be, I don't recall it having been done, but I would interpret it as fully within the purview of the committee to create its own ad hocs to explore things. But with a real appreciation that whatever comes out of that has no pre-endorsement by either of our governing bodies. It's only to flesh out a prospective proposal for their consideration and nothing that would be binding on the bodies.
I can verify with our city attorney as well, just because I think it is a good question to make sure that we are within the correct purview, and even to your question of now non-Brown Act. Typically, the mayor on our end would make the appointments to ad hoc, so we'll just verify that that's.
Yeah, the one thing I add to that in terms of precedent is on this committee, gosh, it was probably 4 years ago.
Our
Right.
purpose statement.
Yeah, that purpose statement that we considered at the beginning was developed by similar process. And I can't remember if we formally created an ad hoc committee or not, but I know I worked on that document with, I can't remember who I worked on it with.
Yeah.
But we then proposed it to this committee and then brought it back to our respective bodies for agreement. So, but I can't remember if we created a formal ad hoc committee or not, but we did a process similar to what we're talking about.
I think that's fine. I don't have an opinion on it, a strong opinion anyway. I'm just looking for precedent. I can't think of a time when a committee has appointed a subcommittee that involves a board member in any other space. I just can't think of one to point to. So that's my question, because I would imagine this question will come up. So
Yeah, well, actually, building on Dr. Austin's comment, you know, consideration is board member Darup isn't here today. If he might reasonably say, though I can't imagine it, he'd probably say, thank God I'm not on the committee. But he might say, I'd really like to be on that committee, you know, but I wasn't there to represent my own interests and, you know, didn't get appointed. And that would be unfortunate. So I don't know how best to address that. So my suggestion would be, as I think about it, is maybe amend the motions to take out the appointment of the members. Leave that in the hands in our body, and like appointment to this kind of thing. Oh, you say it's done by the mayor. Yeah, it's done by the board president in our body. So here I would think it would be done by the committee chair. And then we could invest in the committee chair the ability to appoint, and she could maybe research some of these issues and then make whatever appointment she thought was appropriate.
I'm fine with that modification to the motion.
Yeah, and we'll do the necessary follow-up as well, and I can work with the chairperson. I am trying to recall what process we use for the purpose statement, but it's not coming back to me, so we can check the minutes. I'm positive that for the adoption of the purpose statement, that went to the respective bodies after this committee agreed upon it, but I'm not remembering the earlier part of
I don't
it.
remember either.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we were all here. So we'll go back and check the minutes and
Let's-
get a sense of it.
I want to take us down a rabbit hole, but I think the committee members themselves just kept bringing back drafts on their own, that there was not truly an ad hoc setup.
Yeah, there were committee members working together in the background.
Yeah,
And
But-
we would discuss it here.
Yeah, sub-Brown Act collaboration, but not a formal committee.
but if we don't need to rush to that decision today, it's probably worth considering.
Yeah,
Proposal is like,
good point. Oh my God, look at all the city clerking with,
So let's look at the
I love
motion. Because did we just say we're not sure it needs to be an ad hoc subcommittee? It could be committee members working in a non-Brown Act, in a sub-Brown Act environment offline to create something. I mean, we're just simply looking for the right mechanism for a couple people to go in depth to give us something that we can.
so yeah, I mean, I would say, I'm sorry, committee,
Please.
Councilmember Brooke has his mic on. Did you want to speak?
No, I'm sorry.
I mean, I think your point is a good one. It's like an ad hoc committee of two versus two people getting together to work together.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, there's no difference except you don't have the formal overhead of
Yeah.
having to do this motion and such.
Good either way.
My suggestion is skip the motion, skip all the overhead associated with it and hope that something comes up for the future.
That's a great plan.
Okay, on that note, I will withdraw.
Okay, so proceeding under the assumption that my colleagues are going to figure out a way to meet and develop this really great idea further. I think we have come to the end of this topic. Are there future business items anyone wants to put on the agenda? Other than this, obviously. Okay, Yeah.
My only question for future was if there's an interest in meeting in December, and if you want to keep the third week as the date, or if you want to have us move up a week. The council break technically starts after that council meeting on the Monday of that third week of December.
So my preference would be to move this meeting to the second week, which would be the 14th. If that works for other people.
that works for me.
Sure. I mean, I have a conflict on my calendar now. It could be changed. I'm sure we'll have to find out what Mr. Durham's schedule is.
I can.
Yes, it's fine.
Great, and if in discussion with the chairperson, obviously, if there's not anything to discuss that day, that can go away, but for now, you can have that hold and I'll work with the clerk's office to get that on our list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, okay, thank you. The meeting is adjourned.